Hey guys, let's rock and roll. LSAT 67, game number 4, the zones and the subzones. So, as always, I'm going to assume that you've already had a crack at this on your own. And if not, then go ahead and try it first. And then once you're done, you can follow along with my explanation, which hopefully will be very enlightening and clarifying for you. So let's see, we have 3 zones. We have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. And within those zones, we have to place subzones. Well, that sounds like a grouping game. We have the groups. Whenever we have groups, we show them like this: group 1, group 2, group 3. In this case, they are zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So we just show them with 1, 2, and 3. And into those zones, we are placing subzones. And all the subzones are either H, I, or R. Now, no more than 3 subzones can be designated for each of the 3 uses, not for each of the 3 zones. So we could theoretically, in a zone, it's not saying that we can only have maximum 3 in each group. Whoops, sorry. It's not saying that we can have maximum 3 in each group. That's what a lot of people thought when they first read this. I think that's what I thought when I first kind of skimmed through this and I was doing this game really quickly, but it's not what it's saying. It's saying maximum 3 for each use, right? So these are the 3 uses: housing, industrial, and residential, or retail, whatever R stands for, right? So we have maximum 3 of each variable. Whenever you have maximums or minimums of the variables, you just write them next to the variables. If we had a maximum or a minimum in each group, we would write it on top of the groups. But that doesn't exist here. We could theoretically have an empty group. We could have a group with a whole bunch of stuff in it. As of now, we'll see what the rules kind of tell us as we get further down the page. But so far, hopefully everything makes sense. We're just placing H's and I's and R's into the 3 groups, and there's maximum 3 of each. I hope my writing wasn't too messy here. Retail subzones are not allowed in the first zone, so that's easy. This first group, no R's. Bingo. Nothing else to talk about there. No more than 2 subzones for housing are allowed in any particular zone. So that's an R. I'm just going to make that a little more clear. So you can't have the same housing. You can't have 2 housings together. You can't have 3 housings together. No more than 2 housings are allowed in any one particular zone. So I'm not going to write this underneath the groups because this applies to every group. I'm going to write it off to the side. You can never have 3 H's together in the same group, is essentially what it's saying, right? And the box means in the same group, and I put an X through it to show that that could never happen, right? Next, we have no more than 1 retail subzone is allowed whenever there is housing. So if you have housing, you can't have 2 retails, right? 2 or more. You also can't have 3 retails, but that would be included by this rule, right? You could do this as a conditional rule, like if housing, then, maximum 1 retail or something like that. But conditional rules, if you can show them in a non-conditional way, it's usually easier because conditional logic is a little trickier to think through. Essentially, all they're telling you is that H and 2 R's can't go in the same group, right? Once you have an H, there's maximum 1 retail subzone. So if you have 2 retails with an H, that would break that rule. Certainly, if you had 3 retails with an H, that would also break that rule, but you don't need to also write that because that would break this rule as it's written as well. Next, we have this last rule, which really is 2 rules. First of all, industrial subzones cannot be in a zone where there's housing, so I and H can't go together, right? And again, you could have written if I, then no H, but that means the same thing. So why make your life difficult? Why write it like an if-then statement? And then you have industrial subzones are also not allowed in any zone where there's 3 retails. So you can't have I going along with... If all the 3 retails end up in one zone, then that zone better not have an I in it. So we sort of have 4 groups of things that can't go together, and then retails can't go in the first zone. That's our entire setup, ladies and gentlemen. So let's move on to the questions. Number 18, what's an acceptable layout? So we're going to check the rules. We're going to check which ones break Rule 1, which ones break Rule 2. We're going to go through the rules in order, and we'll start with whatever rule was easiest, because we might as well. There's no rule that says we have to do the rules in order. It happens to be that this first rule was probably the easiest rule anyway, so let's look for which one breaks this first rule. Does any of these 5 answer choices put retail in the first zone? Not A. A has nothing in the first zone. Not B. C has retail in the first zone, so C is out. So I'm going to go ahead and be left with A, B, D, and E because D and E don't break that rule either. Next, I can never have 3 H's in the same subzone. A seems fine. B, I have not broken that rule. D, I have 3 housing in zone 2 in D. So D is out, and E looks fine. Next, I can't have, let's do this one. I and H can't go together. So A, do I ever have I and H going together? No. B, do I ever have I and H going together? Yes. B, zone 1, we have housing and industrial, and so therefore B is out. So we're going to be left with A and E doesn't break that rule. H can't go with two R's. Let's look at this one. H can't go with two R's. A, I have housing and two retails in zone 2 in A. So A in zone 2 breaks that rule, and so therefore E is the correct answer for number 18. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next one, number 19, which the following cannot be true within a single zone. Now, normally, for cannot be true, we would just test each of these out, see which one doesn't work. But because this is close enough to the beginning of the game and these answer choices look pretty basic, let's try to see if we could just sort of think through them, right? Look for one that immediately breaks one rule or another. So A, for example, there's no reason why A wouldn't work. Two subzones in any given group are designated, one housing and one retail. Why can't I do that? I can't do it in group 1, but why can't I put a housing and a retail in group 2 or in group 3? That wouldn't break any of these things. And so therefore, it's unlikely to be the answer. So let's kind of jump past it. Same thing with B. Industrial and retail, nothing wrong with putting an I and an R together as long as you don't put an I and three R's together because that would break this rule. C, could you have three subzones, all of them retail? Nothing wrong with that as long as you don't put an I with them because, again, that would break this rule. D, so you have four subzones are designated and none of them are industrial. So if you don't have industrial, that means they're all H's and R's. So let's think, what would one of these groups look like if it was just H's and R's? Well, you can't have three H's. You can only have maximum two H's, right? So let's say you max out on H's. Well, now you can't put two R's because of this rule. See, these are the two rules that are going to cause you problems here. This rule tells you can't have three or more H's, so you can only have two H's. The problem is if you have two H's, then you're going to need to have two R's. And if you have one H, you're going to need to have three R's, so that's going to be even worse, right? Once you have an H, you can't have more than one R. And you're going to need to have some of both because you need to fill up four spots. You can't have only H's and only R's because there's maximum three of each. And so since this wouldn't work, there's no way to do this to fill up a group with four spots with H's and R's, so therefore D is the answer, cannot be true. Let's move on to number 20. Number 20, what's the maximum number of subzones allowed in zone 3? So we want to try to max out, totally max out, throw as many letters as we can in zone 3 and see what that gets us. Now, there's different strategies for maxing out because we have three letters to choose from, and each letter has its own properties and its own restrictions that come along with it. And so there's three different ways we can do this. We can try to max out on H's. Let's say we throw all the H's in, or we can throw all the I's in, or we can throw all the R's in. Now, what if we threw all the H's in? Could we put any I's? No, because I and H don't go together. Could we put any R's? Yes, we could put one R, but we can't put two R's because of this rule. And so that's how we would max out in that scenario. So we've proven that the answer is not 2 or 3 because it's at least 4, right? So it can't be A or B. Anyway, let's keep going. What if we have three I's? Could we have any H's? No. Could we have any R's? Sure. I can't put three R's because that would break this rule, but I could at least put two out of the three R's. So now we broke our record. We have 5 subzones in one zone. What about the last scenario where we have 3 R's? We can't put any I's because of this rule. That would break this. We also can't put any H's because of this rule. So we'd be stuck with the way it is. And so therefore our maximum is 5. And so therefore the answer is D. 21, if 3 subzones are designated for each use. This was number 20. Number 21, there's going to be 3 of each, which means I have to use 3 H's, 3 I's, and 3 R's. So, which one of the following could be true? Let's go ahead and try them one at a time. A, and one of them is going to be the answer. Hopefully it's further up the page. A, could we have one subzone and 3 is designated for industrial, and exactly 1 and 3 is designated for retail? So 1 I, 1 R. Well, let's think about that. Where are the other R's going? All right, the other 2 R's are going to have to go somewhere because we have 3 of each in this question, right? This was probably, I want to say, the most time-consuming question on this game, and as you can see, most of the questions are pretty quick, so not that that's saying that much, but sometimes you just have a question like this where you have to test out a bunch of scenarios, and that's totally fine, right? You budget for that by going really quickly on everything else. So let's think about making A true, and we want to see, is this going to work? Are we going to be able to place everything else once the dust settles? Are we going to have to break a rule or not? So 1 subzone and 3 is for industrial, 1 is for retail. So again, we have to have 2 other retails. They can't go in group 1. They would have to go, therefore, in group 2. We also need 2 other industrials that are going to have to go Problem with the industrials is now we have to place the H's somewhere, right? We have to save room for the H's because the H's and the I's could never go together. And where can we put the H's now? The H can never go with 2 retails, so the H is not going to go there. The H cannot go with I, so I'm going to have to throw all 3 H's in there. But wait a second, you're saying. Wait a second, Nate. That doesn't work because you have a rule that says 3 H's can never go together. And so therefore A cannot be true. We're looking for what could be true. If this was a cannot be true question, our work would be done, obviously. B, exactly 2 subzones in zone 2 are designated for housing. So could I have 2 housings in zone 2? Let's see, what else? Where could I put the last housing? Let's go ahead and, I don't know, go ahead and put that last housing over here. Why not? All right, we can't put all 3 of them together. And anyway, it's telling us exactly 2 subzones in zone 2 are designated for housing. So now let's go ahead and put all 3 industrials in the remaining group, because they must be. They can't. The industrials and the housings cannot overlap. And all we have to do now is figure out how to place the 3 retails. Now, I can go ahead and put 1 retail with these 2 housings. I just can't put 2 because that would break this rule. I'm always keeping an eye on the rules that pertain to the letters that I'm trying to place. So R's, I can't put 2 R's with an H, and I can't put 3 R's with an I. These are my 2 R rules, really, and obviously this. But I could put 2 R's with these 3 I's. In fact, we already did that in number 20. And as you can see, I placed 3 of each of the letters, and so therefore B works. B is the answer. Let's do number 22. I'm going kind of fast because I'm assuming you've done this game before, but if it's too quick, just kind of slow it down, watch it again. Everything is there, and the key to going fast is that I'm constantly looking at the rules. My eyes are kind of living over here on this setup, and every time I want to place a letter somewhere, I'm looking for a rule that involves that letter to see if it's telling me anything. 22, if 1 subzone in each of the zones is designated for industrial. So we always start by making the if true, just like we did in 21. We drew out the if. In this case, we're doing the same thing. Go ahead and put an industrial in each. That means there's going to be no H's anywhere because H can never go with I. So we could maybe throw some R's in or not, but we certainly can't throw any H's in. Which of the following could be true? A, could I have more retails in 2 than in 3? Why not? Why can't I put 2 retails in 2 and 1 retail in 3, right? That would work. Or, why do I even have to do that? Maybe I could put 1 retail in 2 and 0 retails in 3, right? Either way, that's totally fine. We haven't broken any rules. There's no rules about R and I except for this one, that I can't go with all 3 R's. But, right, nothing wrong with doing this. This would make A true, and so therefore A is the answer. And if you glance at some of these other ones, even though we already have the answer, so you don't really have to, but they all don't work for one reason or another. Obviously they don't, but a lot of times it's pretty clear. Like B, you can't have housing anywhere, so B would never work. C, 2 subzones in zone 1. What are the 2 subzones going to be in zone 1? You can't put R there and you can't put housing there, so it's kind of left the way it is, right? And as you can see, these other ones also don't work. E, for example, 4 subzones in zone 3. Good luck. You're going to have to put 3 R's there, and that's going to break this rule. D, 3 subzones each are designated in zone 2 and zone 3. What are you going to put there? You can't put any H's, right? You only have R's to choose from, so you can't go like this, right? That's too many R's. You can only have max 3 of each letter, as you know. So anyway, that's 22. 23, let's do 23 over here. If 3 subzones in all are designated for retail, and a subzone in 2 is designated for housing. So we have housing there, and we have 3 retails. Good. 3 subzones in all are designated for retail, and we have a housing in zone 2. Can we figure anything out here? Right? Are there any inferences here? Where do those retails go? They can never go in 1, right? They could maybe go in 3, right? And you couldn't put more than 1 of them in 2, right? Because this rule tells you that once you have an H, you can't have 2 R's. Maximum 1 R. So there's 0 in 1, and there's maximum 1 in 2, which means there have to be at least 2 of them have to go in group. Whoops, I put the number 2 because that's what I was saying, but I was thinking about the letter R. You have to have at least 2 R's in 3 here. How do I know that again? Because no R's go in 1 vis-a-vis this rule, and maximum 1 R, if that, is going to go in group 2 vis-a-vis this rule. So you have 3 R's to place. It means 2 of them are going to have to, at least 2 of them are going to go in group 3. And the only question is whether that third one is maybe going to go in 2 or it's maybe going to go in 3. Okay, which of the following could be true? A, could you have 2 subzones in zone 1 designated for housing? I don't see why not. Let's just go ahead and put 2 housings there and we're happy. We can call it a day. A works, and that's the That's the answer. So we're kind of done here. Why did some of these others not work? So B, more subzones are designated for industrial in 2 than in 3. There can be no industrial subzones in 2 because there's a housing one there. Housing and industrial don't get along. C, could there be more designated for retail in 2 than in 3? No, there have to be more in 3 than in 2 for the reason that we have discussed about a minute ago. D, could the same number of subzones be designated for retail in 2 and in 3? Well, first of all, there's no way to split 3. The number 3 cannot be split up into even numbers, right? You can't have 1.5 retails in 2 and 1.5 retails in 3, right? So that's going to be impossible. And E, a subzone in 3 is designated for housing. I can't put housing in 3 because as we've determined, that would be probably a tricky answer. I feel like if that were A, a lot of people would have picked that. But our inference was that there have to be 2 retails in 3, and so therefore once there's 2 retails, this rule is telling you that no housing is going in there. Anyway, hopefully this game is no longer as tricky as it was when you started watching it. I hope it's at least as easy as it was when you started watching this video. And if it was helpful, do me a favor, shoot me a comment, shoot me a like, hit subscribe, and definitely for thousands of more video explanations of official LSAT prep test questions, go to masterlsat.com.